Jai Prabhuji. We continue our class talking about Brahman, and today we will mainly focus about how Brahman is referred to or how Brahman is described as Sat Chid Ananda. So oftentimes when you read in the scriptures, it says that Brahman is Sat Chid Ananda. And let's go over the meaning of the individual words of Sat Chid Ananda. Sat means truth, absolute truth, or existence. That which is enduring and unchanging. Chit is consciousness, understanding and comprehension. Ananda is bliss, a state of pure happiness. So when we get familiar with those terms, we can say that Satchidananda is the blissful experience of pure consciousness, truth, and ultimate bliss. So now we will go over each one of these definitions. So we will start with Sat. Prabhuji writes, Brahman does not exist, but it is existence itself, or Sat. Here the main point is that Brahman, it's not that Brahman exists somewhere outside of me, but Brahman is existence itself. Without Brahman, nothing can exist. If we go back to our previous class, we know that Brahman is the origin of everything that exists. Vedanta defines reality in terms of perpetuity. Anything that goes under changes or keep changing cannot be considered as real or reality. Only what is immutable can be considered as real, and being the absolute immutability, Brahman is the only reality. And let's read what Prabhuji says. Brahman is the screen on which the game of life, Lila, is projected. Everything we see in the movie exists due to the presence of the screen. Prabhuji says that Brahman is the screen on which the game of life is projected. Now, funny enough, we are in a state that we are ignoring the screen. We are too busy in what's happening in the movie, in the story of our life. So if we take the screen analogy, we can see that the movie is able to be seen just because there is a screen over there. So the screen is unchangeable. The screen stays the same always. The movie can change. We can project a war movie, we can project romantic movie, we can project a comedy movie on the screen, but the screen stays the same. But the ability of the movie to be projected on the screen is due to the presence of the screen. The same happens in our life. We tend to be occupied and too busy and too engaged in the movie itself, in the story of our life, instead of paying attention to the screen. So what is this element, we can say, that is unchangeable and no matter what is happening, always exists? Imagine that you sit in a theater and you're watching a movie and someone by you all the time tells you, oh, you know, this guy is not really a cowboy. He's going to die soon. and you know, this couple is not really a couple in reality, etc., it will be a disturbance to you. In order to watch the movie, we need to have a certain forgetfulness. We need to forget that we are actually seeing a movie. If there will be someone who will always remind us that it's a movie and it's not reality, then we will not be able to watch the movie, right? We need to be in a certain forgetfulness to watch it and to identify with it. It's not only to watch the movie, it's to be identified with it. So the same happens in our life at the moment. We are too engaged and we are too occupied with everything that is happening that we forget about Brahman, that we forget about the true reality. We are too busy with the happenings on the screen that we forget to pay attention to the screen itself. And it's very important to understand this point because it's related to the basic of the foundation of the forgetfulness. And while we are too busy with what is happening, we forget to pay attention to the screen, to Brahman, to the true reality. So if we look at our body, we can see that there are many changes. We can see that we can even remember ourselves as kids, teenagers, adults, etc. But if each one of us will look for a second, he will see that there is always this unchangeable self that exists from the day we remember ourselves. Something that was always there. Even as we pass through the different phases of life, there is one thing that we can relate or we can say, yeah, that was always there. And this is the truth self. This is the absolute reality, that no matter what changes we were going through, it always exists. And this is Brahman, the absolute truth, that no matter what movie is being projected on the screen of life, the screen is not being affected. The screen is a screen. Let's move on to cheat, and we will start by reading Prabhuji's quote. Every entity in creation that seems conscious borrows its awareness from Brahman, which is the only source of consciousness. So we can see here that Brahman as consciousness is the initial, it's not an element, but it's the initial form that exists, and that from it every human being borrows its consciousness. Here we can ask, what is to be aware of something? Are we aware? In how many actions throughout the day I can say, yes, I was aware of each one of my actions? There are so many actions or functionalities during the day that we perform that we don't feel that we were aware. It's like they just flew by. And you know this phase when we say, oh, I was on automatic pilot mode. And it's exactly it. What does it mean to be on automatic mode? It's when we are performing some actions that we are not aware of them. But it's not that there was not awareness. We didn't pay attention to awareness. We just let our body perform these actions. But we are so used to act in a way that we don't pay attention. We don't pay attention to my breathing at the time of the performance. We don't pay attention to our bodily postures, etc. When we perceive ourselves, we feel aware. Or if we look superficially, we can see that the body is aware, the body and mind. But if the body is disconnected from the mind, it cannot experience anything. So where is this awareness? Where is this consciousness? Consciousness is beyond the body and mind. The body and the mind are being able to be conscious because consciousness is not something that we have. Consciousness is what we are. Like, nothing that we have, such a mind or a body, can even be said to exist unless we are first conscious. So consciousness is before anything else. Without consciousness, we will not be able to experience in this life. Now, there's no question that the body and the mind have qualities, but the knower of these qualities is consciousness. And consciousness is not a quality, it's the essence of what we are. Consciousness, it's not a quality that we have or we can add to ourselves. It's the essence of what we are. It's the knowingness that reveals all the qualities as the origin of it all. Can anything exist without being conscious? It comes to show us that consciousness is first and most before anything else. This body can function and this mind can function because of consciousness and not the opposite. If we take consciousness out, you will see that there is no functions that can happen. In many darshans with Prabhuji, he directs us to pay attention not to what we do, but if we were aware or if we were conscious of what we did, or more than this, if we are aware of our existence. So Prabhuji is oftentimes directing us not to be so involved in what is happening and not to be so occupied with what is going on, but to pay attention to consciousness itself. Like anything that is happening in a field, that what makes us conscious of is consciousness itself. So once we pay attention and once we are conscious, we can act in a smart way, we can say, or in a way that will benefit our spiritual journey. Because the main point is if we are aware or not. If we want to live life, just with being on an automatic pilot, we can, but then you feel that you lived life. You did a lot of things, but you weren't present. You weren't conscious of. And that's basically, I don't know if you can call it to live life or to be fully, obviously you cannot be fully content when you don't live life full of consciousness, full of awareness. Let's move on to Ananda, which is the absolute bliss. And this state of Ananda should not be confused with a state of happiness or joy. Ananda is not a state that depends on a source or an object. So we can check ourselves and the way we live, and we can see that happiness comes from a sensory perception. We relate our enjoyment to object or people. People say, oh, this gives me happiness. That person, when I'm with him, I feel happy. When I have this car and I drive it, I feel happy. I feel certain happiness. So we relate our enjoyment to certain objects or to certain people. And not only that, we are striving and making a lot of efforts to obtain these objects as if the happiness exists within them. Prabhuji tells us that when we take, the source of enjoyment, if we take alcohol, if we take cigarette to the laboratory and we will examine them, we will not find happiness in them. So where does this feeling of happiness exist? This feeling of happiness, or the ability to experience it, it's within ourselves. It's not in the objects itself. If it was due to the object, it means that all of us we will experience the same happiness or joy from the same object. But we can see also that certain people react different to different objects. So the ability to experience this joy, is within us, within our depths. It's not in the objectual world. Bliss does not belong to the dual platform, but to our inner depths. And I think that all of us can look at happiness and see that happiness is relative because it has its opposite. It has the sadness. If we go back to our previous class, we learned that in this world, we experience opposites. And we are able to experience opposites or to appreciate one condition just because we have the experience of the other, of its opposite. We experience to feel joy because we experience sadness. We experience heat because we know what cold is. So the happiness, this relative happiness, while it has its opposite, cannot be absolute. It's not Ananda. We can definitely feel joy. We can definitely feel certain moments of happiness, but it's not the absolute bliss. It's not Ananda. Ananda is transcendental to both happiness and distress. And it's important to understand in this relation that Sat is not the limited existence of the objective phenomena. When Chit is not the consciousness of perceptible objective phenomena. And also we can understand that Ananda is not the emotional happiness or enjoyment associated with the experience of objective phenomena. This is kind of a mid-summary in order for us to continue and go on to understand that Satchidananda has no relation to the world that we perceive with our mind and with the senses. That Ananda is not the emotional happiness or certain enjoyment that we feel at certain moments. When we turn to Satchidananda, we need to come and understand that we're talking about a state that is beyond of what we are familiar with, beyond of what we are known. It's a state of absolute bliss, absolute consciousness, and absolute truth. It's not something that it's part of our experience in this objective world. The second thing that it's important to understand about Satchidananda is that Satchidananda are not attributes of Brahman. They are Brahman itself. When we talk about what is Satchidananda, we refer to the essence of what Brahman is. There is a difference between essence and an attribute. Essence or nature is what something is. Its very essence. But a quality is a characteristic that something has. So when we talk about Brahman, it needs to be very clear to us that Satchidananda is not a certain attribute that Brahman has, but it's the essence, it's the nature of Brahman. So truth, consciousness, and infinity are the nature of Brahman rather than being qualities that belong to Brahman. Let's look at two examples that will clarify to us this distinction between essence and quality, or the nature of something versus characteristic. We will look at a flower that we say the flower is yellow. So we can say that the yellow color is incidental quality that belongs to the flower. The color does not constitute the flower itself. So if we take away the color, there will still be a flower. Not only that, the color can change. It can be white, it can be red, but it will always be a flower. In this case, we can see that the changes that the flower is going under is conditionally, that it's conditionally yellow, because when the flower is a bud, it's green, right? And then when it matures, it's yellow. And when the flower wilts, it's already brown. So the statement that we say the flower is yellow applies only to a particular quality that belonging to the flower, but at a particular time. We cannot say that the flower is yellow always. We just spoke about the different stages that it goes through. So back to what we started with, that anything that goes to changes cannot be considered as real, applies here. So it cannot apply the absolute truth. Now, if we look at the fire example, we can say that the fire is hot and illuminate. And when we say that the fire is hot and luminous, we can see that heat and luminosity are not qualities that belong to the fire. They are the fire itself. They are the very nature or the very essence of the fire. If we remove light and if we remove heat from the fire, then the fire becomes non-existence, because it's nothing else than heat and light. So not like in the flower example, the heat and light are the very nature of the flower. They are not qualities that belong to it. They are not like in the example of the flowers that we see that there are conditional qualities that belong to it. So when Brahman is described as truth, consciousness, and infinity, it is not talking about qualities that Brahman has. It is describing what Brahman is. And we said already that Brahman is immutable, and that Brahman is unchangeable. So if something at one point and then at the other moment it's something else, obviously it is not the absolute truth. It's not Brahman. When we look at the qualities, the quality itself, the quality cannot be experienced if it didn't exist prior to it. So existence is prior to the quality, because qualities themselves exist. In order to experience something, it needs to exist first. And that brings us back to that Brahman is absolute existence. Brahman is the origin. Brahman is the initial existence of everything. And we can say, like, what is it that lends existence to all qualities? Brahman. Brahman is the one who lends the existence to us. So existence is not a quality that Brahman has. Brahman is existence itself, the very foundation of any on all and all conscious experience. To summarize, we can say that consciousness and infinity are not and cannot be qualities belonging to Brahman, because existence and consciousness and infinity have no physical characteristic that can even be described in terms of qualities. Immutable truth cannot be different from immutable truth. Consciousness cannot be differentiated from consciousness. And the same for infinity. It cannot be differentiated from infinity. So instead, existence, consciousness, bliss, which are identical to Brahman, they what makes it possible to all qualities exist and be known, while Brahman itself is nirguna, in nirguna Brahman, devoid of all qualities. Remember that we said that Brahman cannot be described, is not a form, cannot be defined, is devoid of any quality. So when we say Sat Chid Ananda, we are here to describe what Brahman is. We are here to direct ourselves to a state where there is absolute consciousness, absolute truth, and absolute bliss. And I wish it to all of us. So thank you for joining us. We will meet in the next class. Jai Prabhuji.